It's working. Doesn't matter. You clicked it.
Yeah, what do we do about that?
Nothing. Just go ahead and do it.
Can I get a volunteer to read what is the Celebrate Recovery program?
No.
Bob?
That's voluntold.
What is Celebrate Recovery? Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered 12-step program that will also teach us the 8 spiritual principles found in the Beatitudes in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This is a working discipleship program for our lives. The focus of the group is to deepen our relationship with Christ, or for you to become introduced to Christ. Then we take an inventory of our lives and confess to God and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. We humbly ask God to remove our character defects so that we can make amends and restitution to those we have harmed, except when to do so would injure them or others, and also to forgive those who have hurt us. Then we continue this process through prayer and meditation to know God's will for us and the power to carry it out. With this spiritual awakening, we now carry this good news to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. This becomes our new pattern of living.
Amen. So when you hear that church talk, you know, they say about making disciples, this is it right here. This is the recipe. All right. So tonight is a testimony night. We alternate from week to week from testimony to lesson. Tonight is a testimony night. On testimony nights, we talk about hurts, habits, and hang-ups. So if you're here just supporting somebody else, be careful because you might identify with some of this stuff. I'm just saying. So can I get a volunteer to read hurts? Chris.
A hurt could be classified as any life experience that may have damaged your heart, some offense against you that crippled your ability to deal with the world in a healthy way, something that may have twisted your view of yourself, God, or others. Some common hurts include abandonment, abortion, abused as a child or by a spouse, employer, or the church, adoption, betrayal, dysfunctional family, divorce, alcoholism, drug abuse, rage, etc., neglect, rape, rejection, cheating, affairs, and unforgiveness.
Unforgiveness. All right. Can I get a volunteer to read habits? Vicky.
Habits tend to be unhealthy patterns that often start as a perceived remedy for some problem in your life, but end up turning into a chronic bad behavior or addiction. Habits are the repeat default scripts you run to when the going gets tough and continually lead to trouble in your life. Some common habits are abusive behavior, alcohol, bitterness, drugs, eating disorders, gambling, gossip, isolation, lying, self-harm, sexual integrity, spending problems, wasteful pursuits, seems like it's the same, workaholism, pornography addiction, and cell phones.
And cell phones. Don't believe me, leave it at home.
Go crazy.
All right. And lastly, hang-ups. Can I get, Lou said he wants to read.
And lastly, hang-ups are those roadblocks that keep you from progressing further in God's plan for your life. They are often shaped by some bent thinking you may have received as a child or some unhealthy attitude you may have adopted as a means of coping with life's challenges. Here are some common hang-ups. Anger, anxiety, worry, arrogance, body image, bullying, bigotry, codependency, control, depression, fear, greed, envy, guilt, false and or shame, lack of self-control, lack of trust in God, laziness, materialism, passive-aggressive behavior, people-pleasing, perfectionism, pride, procrastination, and sarcasm.
Sarcasm. Sarcasm is also a form of abuse, just in case. It's always funny.
I know, he abuses me all the time.
All right, so tonight we're going to go over the principles. There's 8 of those. The reason why there's 8 principles in 12 steps is because part of those principles encompass 2 steps. So that kind of gets the count right. Almost everything in Celebrate Recovery is got an acrostic. So these big capital letters are going to spell out recovery. So just a little insight, baby. It took me a while to figure all that out, man.
We'll read the red ones.
Yeah, that's right. So Chris will read the principle, and then we'll respond with the
appropriate beatitude, it'll be in red, so when it's in red, we'll all say it together.
The R in recovery is this: realize I am not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing, and that my life is unmanageable.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3.
E, earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to him, that he has the power to help me recover.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Matthew 5:4.
C, consciously choose to commit all my life and my will to Christ's care and control.
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Matthew 5:5.
O, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5:8.
B, voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life, and humbly ask him to remove my character defects.
Every change?
Every change.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Matthew 5:6.
E, evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Matthew 5:9.
Another R, reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, for Bible reading, and for prayer, in order to know God and his will for my life, and to gain the power to follow his will.
Blessed are those who celebrate recovery.
And finally, Y, yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words.
Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:10.
So, John's gonna come up and read our devotion, and I am gonna pass the basket around. If you can afford to donate, we appreciate it. It's offset some of our costs for operation, and if you can't, it's okay too.
I'm John, great believer in Jesus Christ.
Hi, John.
John.
Everything.
Camera won't see you.
We're gonna talk about alarms. Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. Proverbs 27:23. My car makes a bell sound when something goes wrong. For example, if I'm running low on gas or the door is open while the car is on, I'll hear a binging sound. Today, it started binging, but I couldn't identify what was wrong. I was parked. The car was off. Plenty of gas, and so on. Then I realized the key was in the ignition. My car was warning me not to get out of the car and leave the car inside. I've done that.
The key's inside here.
Most of us will agree that warnings are important. That's especially true in recovery. The warnings won't be alarms or bells or flashing lights or whistles. They will be binging sounds. They won't be binging sounds, but when we hear them, we'll know that we are in danger of either relapsing or taking on another hurt, hang-up, or habit. And this will end up slowing down our progress and keeping us from being free. Some warning signs are simple, like feeling tired, unappreciated, entitled, easily offended. Sometimes they come in the form of uneasy feeling, usually when we're with someone we shouldn't be with, or in a place that isn't safe for us. At other times, the warning urges us to do something, to take action. These warnings won't do us any good if we ignore them. But when we pay attention, we could prevent ourselves from getting sidetracked and missing out on the good thing God's bringing to our lives. Pray. Father God, we thank you once more tonight, this opportunity. Thank you for everyone who's been here tonight. Thank you for what you're going to do for George. And we ask you to show us the warnings before they get here. In your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. So, before I introduce our speaker,
So, see, that's what God gave us. He gave us the Holy Spirit to be that alarm system that He'll tell us when we're getting close to doing something. So, told me, last year when I was coming back home from the mountains that I needed to take my cruise control off because I didn't ride very good. And I did not turn my cruise control off, and within seconds I was in the swamp down there. That's when I wrecked my bike. Yeah, the Holy Spirit told me to turn it off, and I didn't do it. And like that, the consequences were immediate. So that alarm system didn't work for me. I bet I'll do it again though. All right, so man, I don't know if I've heard his testimony or not. I've seen him around, you know, since I've been coming around. Yeah, I think so too. Anyway, George, come tell your story.
My name's George and I'm a believer.
Hi, George.
I'm in recovery from drug addiction, but I struggle with a lot of stuff. I'm a hypocrite. I'm judgmental. I'm self-righteous. I struggle with those things. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight. I'm here tonight for the one. And I need to always remember that Celebrate Recovery. It ain't about how many you got coming. It's about the one. It's about the one that maybe I can have an impact on their life. And I want you to know that God is alive and well. And God's still in the miracle business. And if you don't believe that, you can believe that I believe that. And say, I believe that George believes that God's in the miracle business. So we're going to see what happens. And with that, I will start. And God, please help me. I'm married with 3 children, successful businessman, active church member. I'd been clean for many years and I'd relapsed. I was trying to look good on the outside and I was dying on the inside. Addicted to drugs and putting them before 4 of the most precious things in my life. I got caught getting high by my wife. I believe at that moment if she'd had a gun, she'd have shot me and killed me. She yelled, "I hate you." My daughter, teenage daughter, ran down the stairs and said, "Daddy, I hate your guts. I wish you'd die." My 2 boys, I was their coach, their scout leader, all that good dad stuff. They just cried. They couldn't look at me. We lived in the nice gated community that the police didn't come to our neighborhood unless they were soliciting funds. So when my wife called the police and I didn't put up a fight, and they came in the house and they were like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I need help. I can't stop." And so I was handcuffed, carried outside. It was dinner time in the suburbs, and everybody, when the cops pulled in the neighborhood, everybody was on the porch. What's going on over there? And handcuffed and carried off. I was carried away broken, lost, humbled. And I've done a lot of pain and damage, and how could God ever love someone like me? So, in the back of that police car, it was December the 11th of 2004. And that's the last day I ever used. So, and I remember that prayer, "God, please help me." And I knew God had answered it. I've come to learn that God doesn't cause bad things to happen in my life. I've just come to learn that God allows things to occur to get my attention. What I lacked was humility. And what I lacked was the willingness to tell others that I was getting high. Because when I was praying, God would just say, "Tell some people in recovery that you're getting high." I can't do that. And so I've learned that social acceptability does not equal recovery. I've learned that. So I knew that God had answered my prayer. I thought my marriage was over. My kids would never love me again. A God who carried me through all that. And I believe when I was so disconnected and using again, that I believe that some of those were God's most precious moments of me, because that's when God carried me. It's when I feel so disconnected, and it's like, oh my, that total disconnect, that I believe that that's when God carries me. You know, that love. And so I had to go live in a halfway house with a bunch of other drug addicts. Couldn't stay home. I knew that I was not alone anymore, that I realized that God doesn't make junk, that God had a plan for his lost son, George. Do you see a person for what they have been and condemned into that? Or do you see them for who they can become and encourage them to rise to their potential? You know, my humanness, that's why I'm still judgmental. Self-righteous. I'm a hypocrite, because sometimes I judge a person by what they've done and not what they can become. You know, and so it's something I need to work on. You know, I was living in a halfway house. I had about a month clean, and I got a phone call from a guy who I'd been on a spiritual journey like 5 years earlier. That's where I met this Jesus fella. You know, and it was a pretty powerful experience. And this guy called me up, and he was like, he said, man, I really would like for you to come back and help out and be like be on a team to help guide men on this Jesus walk. And well, word got out in the Christian community that George the crackhead was going to be hanging out with some good Christian men. And there were some good Christian men that were like, no, absolutely not. He does not need to be here. Now, that man has done too much bad stuff. You know, and there was people that adamant, no, he don't need to be, he is not an example of a Christian. And I was pretty cool with Jesus, but I weren't too cool with Christians. And so I called the guy that asked me to go, and I said, look, I said, man, this is what's going on in my life. I've destroyed my marriage. My kids hate me. The business that I have is a mess. Everything is a freaking mess. And I'm just struggling to hang on. And if you want me on your team, great. If you don't, pretty much I kind of said some superlatives. And he said, that's one of the best examples of a Christian I've heard in a long time. I'd love to have you. You know? Being real. You know, and if I can't be real here, then maybe I need to find a new place to hang out. You know? And I've come to learn that people that judge me don't matter. And people that matter won't judge me. And so a lot of my friends, when I first came back, are no longer, I just don't hang out with them no more. You ain't got nothing I want. And so I went to this gathering of people, and we were at training, and we were doing all this stuff, and there were people there that were adamant that I should not be there, and I knew I was not wanted. And it was really hard to show up and be somewhere where you knew you weren't wanted, but there was one man. And this one man was my prayer partner. And I knew him, but I didn't know him. And so the first day, he said, so what's going on in your life? And I just told him what I told y'all. And he didn't say a word. He just loved me. He just loved me in a way that I have never been loved before. Non-condemning, just unconditional, and all he said was, what can I do to help you? And that one man's love is why I never left the church. I didn't leave. I stayed put. I stayed put through all the anguish and animosity that was towards me, and I got the opportunity to go before the cross. And I'd been before the cross before, and I was willing to give Jesus, I'll give you this, and I'll give you this, but you can't have that. I got to control that. Now, I was done controlling. I was beaten. And I was like, I give you all I have. I can't do it anymore. It's all yours. And before that weekend was out, God spoke to me in a loud and clear voice. And he said, George, I got a job for you. And I was like, what? Huh? And I'm like, God, is that you talking? God said, George, I want you to bring Jesus Christ to addicts. And I'm like, God, how am I going to do that? And I never heard another word. That God.
Like figure it out.
You know, and so I've come to learn that God doesn't call the equipped. God equips the called. You know, and God ain't gonna call somebody that isn't capable, that hadn't been there, to guide somebody through it. And so I came home with this purpose. You know, so what did Jesus do? Well, Jesus did not hang out with people that talked about Jesus. All right? Jesus hung out with people that didn't have a clue. Most of them were broken. Most of them were hurting. Most of them were struggling. Most of them were searching. And what did Jesus do? He just loved them. He just loved them in a way that Dave loved me, that changed me and transformed me. And so I could love people. And I could love people in a radical way. And so I hang out with a lot of people that don't want nothing to do with church. And I'm okay with that. I love those people. And so I just loved on them in a different way, in a way that's transforming and non-judgmental, and just be there and present. And through that, they kind of go like, what's wrong? What's going on with you? Because I began to change. When you love radically, you change.
Amen.
And so I've got this purpose. I'm doing all the stuff that God called me to do. I'm calling my children every day. And they didn't want to talk to me, but I told them I was proud of them and that I was their father. And I didn't need to get all up in my head and be mad because my kids were mad at me. I did the deal, you know, and I told them I was proud of them for being strong and just loving on them, knowing they hated me. And that's hard. Loving on your family, knowing they hate you. But it's like, who's the Christian? Who's in recovery? And so I have to look at stuff like that. You know, I was grateful I had a lot of men that had a lot of experience in recovery that were they weren't coddlers. They said, this is the way it is. Either do it or good luck to you, pretty much. And so you know, I was doing all this stuff, and then I had probably about 4 months, and then I heard about the plight of addicts in Guyana. Guyana is a country in South America where they speak English. And at the time that I heard, just something kind of spoke to me. And at the time, there were only 2 12-step recovery meetings in the whole country. And there were 2 places in the whole country that you could get recovery. And one was the Salvation Army, and there was this other place. And if you were a man, you could get recovery. If you were a female, you could not get recovery because it was a British Commonwealth. So women didn't have, we're sorry, they wouldn't help you. And so that's third world country recovery. But they spoke English, so what we did, we were all living in this recovery house, and we decided each one of us was going to give up that one thing, that one special cup of coffee, that cigar, that pack of cigarettes, that energy drink. We were not going to spend the money on ourselves, and we would put that money into a kitty to buy literature for the addicts that were suffering in Guyana. And so we began to start this, and not everybody wasn't about it. You know, I ain't giving up my energy drink for an addict. I don't know, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of old timers, you know, we call them dinosaurs. Some people call them predecessors. People been around a long time, and they were like, what are y'all doing? We're like, we're raising money to get literature for addicts in another country. And they're like, we want to be a part of that. That's pretty cool. And so we got this literature together, and I knew a group that was going to Guyana, and I asked them, I said, will you make sure it goes to the people that need it? And about 2 weeks before they were supposed to go, my wife called me. We hadn't been talking. And she said, I've been asked to go to Guyana. That's kind of what I did. And I said, well, you probably could deserve a vacation. You've been through some stuff. And she was like, what about the kids? And I was like, I think the kids are going to be fine. You know, I just had this feeling, you know, that when you're connected, you just kind of have that feeling everything's going to be okay. You know, and so I said, you need to go, and it's going to be fine. And my wife thought she was going to Guyana to build an orphanage for children with AIDS. And little did she know that the people she was going to be working with were those addicts that were trying to get clean. They were called the A-team, the addict team. And part of their recovery is they had to do free work all day long. So think about community service. So what these addicts did was they found out my wife's husband had relapsed. And they saw the pain in her face. And they saw the anguish she was going through. And they couldn't fix their family, but they could love mine. And they protected her. And they watched out for her. And they took care of her. And my wife got to give them the books. She was the one that passed the literature to them. And what they did was they changed her. Because before she went to Guyana, she hated addicts. Because I had hurt her so bad. Just from my behaviors and stuff. And these addicts in another country just loved her. Period. Just like Dave loved me. You know? Unconditionally. And what they did was they changed her. So she came home and we began to talk. You know? And so I've got this purpose. God hadn't said do anything else. So I got this purpose. Next thing you know, I'm back home. You know? I got this purpose now, and God kind of cleans that mess up. So I had about a year clean. Has Christ ever called you to be an influence in someone's life? I had about a year clean, and my wife, she said, oh, let's have a recovery Bible study. And I was like, okay, that sounds like fun. You know, in that church that I'd been kind of asked to don't come back, I kind of snuck in the back door. You know, I knew who I could hang out with, and I knew who I'd just soon punch as anything. So, you know, just say, I'm being honest. I mean, that's what I feel, you know, and I still have feelings. And I'm not perfect by any means, but there was this young new pastor there. She just got out of seminary, and my wife went to her. She said, well, I've been thinking about starting this thing called Celebrate Recovery. You ever heard of it? And I'd been around since 91, so I knew about a lot of 12-step meetings and stuff like that. And I said, I'd never heard of it. She said, would you be willing to be a part of that? And I said, sure. And so the very first meeting, it was the interest meeting. You know, they opened it up to the church. 15 people showed up. And we were like, okay, this is what you're going to do. Everybody here's got to start talking about all your dirt and all your struggles and all your stuff, because we're going to work steps before we ever start Celebrate Recovery. 8 of them left. So there were 7 of us that started Celebrate Recovery. And we were not welcomed by the church. I had to go do a presentation before the trustees, whatever that bunch of power-hungry people are. And they were like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, we want to do this on Friday night. And they were like, you going to let those people come here? Like, what do you mean, those people? And, you know, those people. I said, so, you mean we're going to let sinners come to church on Friday night? I mean, people are, ignorance is ignorant. And so they were like, well, no, that ain't what we mean. Well, then they said, okay, you can do it, but don't let them get around the children. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you think they're going to the kids are going to catch something? And this is exactly what I told them. I said, don't worry, they've already caught something from you. And, you know, and so we started Celebrate Recovery without a church that backed us. We had the pastors back us, but the congregation, you know, that country club mentality, you know, I'm privileged. And so we started, and it was a struggle. It was dirty ministry. I mean, it ain't pretty tidy, wrap a bow on it. You know, it's dirty, it's painful, it's about life and death. Amen. You know, and it ain't about, oh yeah, and so, you know, it's about seeing somebody get to spend a little time in heaven before they die. It's about help somebody get out of hell that they're in. And so we started that thing, and we trudged the road, and that's why I think about the one, because we'll celebrate 20 years doing Celebrate Recovery in January. and it's been an interesting journey, to lead to say. And many a day I've just been like, I'm done. I can't do this no more. Dealing with the egos and the sickness and all that kind of stuff. And then God just kind of said, George, I didn't tell you to do anything but love addicts. And addict is whatever you want to call it, you know. And so we did this thing. I was able to have my children forgive me. Life is, you know, if you're still alive and they're still alive, there's hope. Don't ever think there's no hope. About 4 years clean, I came home to find my wife. She began to get, she had bipolar, so she started to get real depressed. And I came home one evening and I found her in the bathtub, full of cold water. There was an empty bottle of pills and a bottle of wine by the bathtub, and I was like, oh my God. And the kids are like, something's wrong with Mama. And the phone was ringing, and all these family members called me, and I'm going home like, what's going on? I don't know. I'm not, you know. And so I got home, and I realized she was trying to kill herself. And I don't understand that. I'm too self-centered to friggin' want to kill myself, you know. And so, but I don't understand depression. I don't suffer from that stuff. But I go to a lot of meetings. I mean, I still do with almost 21 years. I still go to a lot of meetings, and I listen to people's stories. And I remember this one lady from Celebrate Recovery that shared that she had tried to kill herself numerous times and had survived. And immediately it was like I called her. And I was like, this is what's going on. Please help me. I cannot do this. I have no clue what to do. And she said, I'm on the way. And she came that night, and she was there for my wife. And I was there for the kids. You know, 4 years earlier, the roles were reversed. You know, and so the next morning, I got up and went to work, and I was furious at God. I was done with this God stuff. And I was like, man, God, you know, if being in a relationship with you and and you continue to crap on my family because I do everything I ask for you to do, then I want nothing to do with this no more. I was done with all this stuff, this kumbaya crap. I was done with it. That morning, I was so angry, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And I got a phone call, and it was an odd number I didn't recognize. And I figured another family member wanting to know what was going on the night before. And I answered the phone, and this voice on the other line said, is this George? And I went, oh my God. She said, this is Miss Faye. See, 3 years earlier, I'd taken two of my kids. We had gone up into some of the poorest parts of Appalachia, and we had just been loved on Miss Faye and her house and her family for a week, and just transforming love. And two of my kids there, and just, you know, we developed a relationship in a week that's never ending. And that morning, she was just like, George, I found this paper, and your phone number was on it, and something said I had to call you. And I knew what that was. You know, that was God calling. That was God like, I got this. This ain't too big for me. I got her. George, I didn't ask you to fix your wife. I asked you to bring Jesus Christ to addicts. You know, I got her. And I realized that God's got her. You know, she celebrated 16 years in June. She's a work in progress, like we all are. You know, we're still together. Been married 35 years. That's a work in progress. Some of the greatest gifts could be my greatest curses, you know, and so it's all about relationships. And so, you know, I got a new sponsor 2 years ago. I wasn't doing any work. I was still going to meetings and stuff, but I wasn't doing any work. And the new sponsor I got he's a hard-nosed, this is what it is, this is what you do. And we talked about unfinished business. We all got unfinished business. I mean, if you're human, you got unfinished business. And so he said, if you want me to sponsor you, you're going to have to do steps. You got to work steps. You got to do step work. And so I began starting doing step work again. Hadn't done any step work. Hadn't really done any step work in like 8 years. I got real sick. Yeah. Being in recovery, I ain't cured. I ain't healed. You know, I'm like Paul, this thorn in my side. It's always going. It ain't never going. My grace is sufficient. It ain't never going nowhere. And so I got to this 9th step, and my sponsor said, and I had like my mom and dad on the list, and my brother on the list, and some other people, and he was like, at the time I had 20 years, and he was like, George, how come they still on your list? Well, it's one I'll be making amends to them for the rest of my life. He said, make amends, make it right. And so my dad never saw me clean. You know, he died before I got clean. And he said, I want you to write him a letter. And I was like, what do you mean? My dad ain't here. He said, I want you to write him a letter. And I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. There I go thinking, you know. Yeah, that's why it's important that I have other people in my life that sort through my craziness and tell me this is what you need to do. Maybe look at this. See it from a different perspective. And so part of this 9th step was I had to write my dad this letter. And I said, hi, Dad. I wish you were here. You were such a good dad. I wish I could have learned from you on how I could be a dad to my kids. You would love them. They're all very different. They would love you. I hope you know how much I wish I could be the son that you deserved. Spend time with you and do stuff together. Dad, I love you. And I'm proud to be your son. I hope we're together one day. Tell Mom that I miss her too. And I love you both. All the best. And so I wrote this letter. And I read it to my sponsor, and we were going through this other stuff, and my sponsor said, well, how about your brother? And I had all these excuses. I hadn't spoken to my brother in 26 years. He lives in Wilmington. My brother's different. He's kind of on the spectrum. And I'd become very comfortable not having a relationship with my brother, and was okay with it, but he was like, so I had all these excuses of why I couldn't get up with my brother. I don't have his phone number. I don't know where he lives, blah, 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 blah. And he said, what's his name and where does he live? And you and him cell phones. He went, he said, here's his phone number, here's his address. Now what's your excuse? He didn't say it that politely. Just saying. And so I immediately was filled with fear. Because all these excuses that I'd been telling myself, somebody was able to just like remove my unwillingness out of the way. And I said, well, let's stay and finish this 9th step, and I'll go make the phone call. He said, no. You get out of here right now, and you go make the call. And so I was so scared to talk to my brother, my only surviving blood family. And I hadn't spoke to him in 26 years. I was so scared. And so I got out to the truck, and I couldn't stop crying, and I called him, and I bubbled some, I don't know what, I talked to a answering machine, and he didn't answer. And then my sponsor said, call me back when he calls you and let me know what happens. And so I didn't hear anything, and I didn't hear anything for a couple of days, and he's like, don't do anything else. You've reached out. We'll do something down the road. Let it go. Let it go. You know. And so it had been like 3 weeks, and I went to my home group on Monday night, and the meeting was on hope. You know, and the meeting was about hope, and that hope, you know, that fire of hope that just breathes when just freaking stuff happens. And I got home, and I've already had this great meeting on hope, and I'm sitting in front of the TV, getting ready to eat dinner, and the phone rings, and it's my brother. And I did not want to answer it. I did not want to answer the phone. I was so scared because I didn't know what my brother was going to say. Fear of the unknown. It's a natural feeling, you know, and so So I answered the phone, my brother talked, and I began to hear what he had been through, and I felt so guilty for not being there for my brother, for not being there to protect him, to be there to take care of him. And so we started this relationship, slowly, talking, but I still felt like it was unfinished. And then about 2 months ago, my brother called me, and he was just like, "Can you help me?" And he needed some help. They just barely get by, and he needed some help. And I was like, absolutely. And I was able to help him in a way that I felt like I was making things right. And I was able to make amends to my brother by helping him. And I was able to scratch my brother off the list. And then I realized that my mom and dad, all they wanted was for me and my brother to have a relationship, and they're both gone. And then I felt that sort of, that's all we've wanted from you, son. Get over yourself. And so I scratched my mom and dad off the list. And so my oldest boy is an addict, and he's the real thing. He don't mess around. I mean, many a times I thought we'd bury him. But the most excruciating thing I've ever been through is dealing with him. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Children could be a freaking curse. And just saying. So I can remember one day he was at the house, and he had been on a freaking 5 or 6 day run. And he was in the yard, and can I come in and take a shower? And I said, no, get out of here. You're dead to me. I'm hungry. I'm like, I'm sorry, I ain't got nothing for you. And he just sat there, and I gave him a roll of nickels. And I said, good luck to you. Get down the road. The pain that his addiction caused was so excruciating. And then so I sent him down the road, and I went to work, and he called me up, and he said, I can't do it anymore. I said, good, you want some help? And no, I'm going to kill myself. And I said, you ain't got to do that, boy. But he wouldn't. Then he hung up, and he wouldn't answer the phone back. And so I had this grip of fear. And at the time, I had another sponsor, and he had buried his son to an overdose. And I called him up, and I said, "Man, this is what's going on." And he said, "Well, what's the worst thing that can happen?" I said, "My son can die." And he said, "I want you to feel that right now." And I did, and I was so scared. And I was so filled with fear that my boy, I would never see him again. That he would never get a taste of the good life. And, but I let him go. Totally, no more helping. I totally let him go. And when I let my son go, God said, George, take care of other people's kids so I can finally take care of yours. And, so my son's got almost 3 years clean. And one of the dreams that I had was that I would get to go to a meeting with my son clean. Well, I've done that. One of my other goals is that one day he'll want to come to Celebrate Recovery. He ain't there yet, but I don't force it on him either. So, today I stand before you. I'll have 21 years December the 12th. And that's no individual accomplishment, and that's an effort. But what I encourage you tonight is I encourage you to get a network of people, because sometimes God just ain't going to talk to me, but you will, and you might be the closest thing to God that I need. But to get a network of people, and when life shows up, and just because you're here, life's going to show up, and to say, this is what's going on. Please help me. And that's how we do this together. So I'm no longer a hopeless dope fiend. I'm a dopeless hope fiend. And thanks for letting me share.